Highways are supposed to be simple. A straight road, a destination ahead, and nothing but miles of darkness between you and home. But the truth is, highways are some of the loneliest places on Earth. At night, when traffic thins out and the road stretches endlessly ahead, strange things happen. Drivers report figures standing where no one should be, cars that appear behind them and never pass, voices heard through open windows in places where no one lives. In this video, you will hear 4 true highway horror stories. These are not urban legends. They are not fictional campfire tales. They are real experiences from ordinary people who were simply trying to get home. And each story has one thing in common. Once these drivers realized something was wrong, it was already too late to turn back. Story 1. The Man on the Shoulder. There's something about highways at night that feels unsettling in a way you can't quite explain. During the day, they're familiar, predictable, safe. But at night, when the traffic disappears and the darkness stretches endlessly ahead, that same road feels different, isolated, vulnerable. And the thought quietly creeps in. If something goes wrong out here, who would even know? This story took place on a long, deserted highway in Arizona. A man, we'll call him David, was driving alone late at night after a work trip. It was around 1:40 a.m. The road cut straight through miles of desert, no exits nearby, no buildings, no lights, just asphalt, darkness, and the low hum of his engine. At first, everything felt normal. Then, David noticed something ahead on the right shoulder of the highway. A person. His first thought was logical. Someone's car probably broke down. That happens on highways all the time. But as he got closer, something felt off. The man wasn't waving for help. He wasn't holding a phone. There was no car nearby. He was just standing there, perfectly still. As David's headlights illuminated him, the details became clearer. The man was tall and thin, dressed in dark clothing. His posture was rigid, almost unnatural. His head was slightly lowered, but his body was facing the road directly. David felt a knot form in his stomach. When his car passed, he glanced over without thinking, and instantly his body went cold. The man's face showed no expression at all. No fear, no urgency, just blank emptiness. But it was his eyes that disturbed David the most. They weren't looking at the car, they were looking through it. David pressed the gas pedal harder. Just keep driving, he told himself. It's nothing, don't overthink it. But highways have a way of amplifying fear once it starts. A few minutes later, David noticed the temperature inside his car drop suddenly. The air conditioner wasn't on, yet the cabin felt colder by the second. Then his radio turned on by itself. At first, it was only static, a harsh, crackling noise. David reached over and turned it off. The static didn't stop. It felt like the sound was coming from everywhere now, from the air itself. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. That's when he looked into his rearview mirror. There were no headlights behind him, no cars, nothing moving on the road. But standing in the middle of the highway behind him was the same man, the exact figure. David's heart slammed against his chest. There was no possible way the man could have gotten there. David had passed him minutes earlier at highway speed. No one could move that fast on foot. He blinked and looked again. The man was closer, still not running, still not moving normally, just there. Panic took over. David pushed the speed past 80 miles per hour. The desert wind roared against the windows as he forced himself to keep his eyes forward. But he kept checking the mirror. Every time he did, the man was still there. Sometimes farther back, sometimes slightly closer. Never disappearing, never approaching normally. It was as if distance didn't matter. David didn't slow down for nearly an hour. Finally, he saw lights in the distance, a small gas station on the edge of a quiet town. He pulled in hard, nearly skidding to a stop, and rushed inside, shaking and breathless. The clerk behind the counter looked up, startled by his condition. David tried to explain what he saw. A man standing on the highway, then behind my car. Before he could finish, the clerk's expression changed. "You saw him too?" the clerk asked quietly. David froze. "You know about him?" The clerk nodded slowly. "There was an accident out there years ago. A man walking along the road was hit late at night. They say he never saw it coming. Since then, people report seeing someone standing on the shoulder. Anyone who stops doesn't always come back." David didn't ask any more questions. When he finally returned to his car, the highway outside looked completely normal, empty, silent, peaceful. No figure, no movement, but the fear stayed with him, because one question refused to leave his mind. If the man wasn't human, why did he look directly at David, and why did he follow him? David never drove that highway alone again. And tonight, if you're driving late and you see someone standing on the shoulder of the road, pay attention. Because the most frightening part isn't that they're asking for help. It's the possibility that they're waiting for you.
Story 2. The car that followed for 80 miles. Highways are built to move people forward. You get on, you drive, and eventually you get off. Cars pass you pass others. Everything follows a rhythm that feels natural and predictable. That's why it's immediately unsettling when something on the road refuses to follow that rhythm. This story comes from rural Ohio and was shared by a young couple who were driving home late one night after visiting family. It was just after 2 a.m. The highway was mostly empty, stretching through farmland and wooded areas with long gaps between exits. The drive had been quiet, peaceful even, until they noticed a car behind them. At first, it meant nothing. Highways are full of cars that appear and disappear. But after about 20 minutes, the passenger casually mentioned something. "Is that car still behind us?" The driver checked the mirror. It was. Same distance, same headlights, never getting closer, never falling back. They brushed it off. Maybe the driver was just cruising at the same speed. 10 minutes later, the passenger checked again. Okay, that's kind of weird. The driver changed lanes. The car changed lanes too. They slowed down slightly. The car slowed down. They sped up. The car stayed perfectly aligned behind them, as if tethered by an invisible string. The couple began to feel uneasy. They tried to laugh it off, but the tension in the car was undeniable. The passenger attempted to look back and see inside the vehicle, but the headlights were too bright. There was no visible silhouette, no movement, just light. Mile after mile passed. 30 miles, 40, then 60. The car never passed, never turned off, never drifted away. The driver's hands tightened around the steering wheel. He began scanning the road for exits, signs, anything familiar, but the highway felt endless, looping through darkness with no indication of relief. Finally, they approached a toll booth, one of the few manned areas they'd seen in over an hour. Relief washed over them. As they slowed and pulled into the toll booth lane, the driver watched the mirror carefully. The car behind them slowed as well. Then, it stopped. The couple paid the toll and waited, expecting the car to pull in behind them. It didn't. Instead, the headlights turned slightly, and the car began reversing, slowly, deliberately. It backed away from the toll booth, re-entered the highway, and disappeared into the darkness it had come from. The couple sat frozen for several seconds before driving forward. Their relief was mixed with confusion and dread. Why follow them for nearly 80 miles, only to turn around at the first sign of people? A few minutes later, they pulled over at a rest stop just beyond the booth. Both of them needed air. The driver mentioned the car to the toll operator who had stepped outside for a break. The operator frowned. "What car?" he asked. "The one that was behind us," the passenger said. "The dark sedan. It followed us all the way here." The operator shook his head slowly. "There were no vehicles behind you for at least the last mile. Your car came through alone." That should have been impossible. The highway was straight. There was nowhere the car could have exited without passing the toll booth. The couple left the rest stop shaken, but eager to be anywhere else. They didn't speak much for the rest of the drive. Every set of headlights in the distance made their stomachs tighten. They made it home safely, but weeks later, curiosity got the better of them. The driver looked into reports about that stretch of highway. What he found disturbed him deeply. There had been multiple late-night accidents involving a dark sedan in that area, cars that followed other vehicles at night, only to vanish after fatal crashes. In several cases, witnesses reported being followed for long distances before the accident occurred. In more than one report, the vehicle was never found. The couple still don't know what followed them that night, but one detail continues to haunt them. The car never tried to pass, never tried to stop them, never made itself fully visible. It simply stayed behind them, watching, waiting. And if they hadn't reached that toll booth when they did, they still wonder how much farther it would have followed, or what would have happened when the road finally ran out.
Story 3. The Voice from the Back Seat. Driving alone at night changes the way you notice sound. During the day, engines, traffic, and conversations blend together. But at night, when the road is quiet and the world feels half asleep, every sound becomes sharper, louder, more personal. This story comes from Pennsylvania and was shared by a woman who experienced something she still struggles to explain. She was driving home late one summer night, just after 1 a.m., along a forest-lined highway that cut through miles of trees. The road was narrow but well-maintained, with no towns nearby and only occasional passing cars. The windows were down slightly, the night air was warm, and the drive felt calm, almost comforting. For the first 30 minutes, nothing felt out of place. Then she heard it, a sound so faint at first that she almost dismissed it. A whisper. She turned the radio off, assuming it was interference or her imagination. The car fell into complete silence, except for the hum of the tires and the rush of air through the open window. A few seconds passed, then the whisper came again, clearer this time. Closer. Her stomach tightened. She glanced at the dashboard, checking the radio. It was still off. The sound hadn't come from outside either. It felt like it had come from inside the car, from behind her. She told herself it was nothing, fatigue, stress, the mind playing tricks late at night. But then the whisper spoke again. It said her name, softly, right behind her ear. Her hands jerked on the steering wheel as fear surged through her. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. Slowly, carefully, she lifted her eyes to the rear-view mirror. The back seat was empty. No movement, no shape, no reflection. Still, the feeling of being watched filled the car. She tried to breathe, tried to stay rational. Then she heard it again, a low voice, calm and deliberate. "Don't stop." Her entire body went cold. The road ahead suddenly felt too long, too dark. She didn't know what terrified her more, the voice itself, or the idea that it knew what she was thinking. Her instinct screamed at her to get out of the car, to run, to escape. Instead, she forced herself to focus on the road. Minutes passed that felt like hours. Every shadow along the tree line seemed closer now. Every curve in the road felt like a trap. She kept checking the mirror, half expecting to see someone sitting behind her. Nothing ever appeared, but the voice didn't return either. Eventually, she spotted lights in the distance, a small town. Without hesitation, she took the next exit and drove straight to the local police station. She parked and ran inside, shaking, barely able to explain what had happened. The officers listened carefully. One of them walked out to check her car, while another took her statement. They searched the back seat, the trunk, even the area around the station. Nothing was found. The officers reviewed nearby traffic cameras from the highway. The footage showed her car driving alone the entire time. No one approaching, no doors opening, no other vehicles close enough to interfere. One officer sat with her afterward. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "You did the right thing by stopping here," he said. She asked what he meant. He paused before answering. "We get calls sometimes. Drivers hear things, see things. Some of them keep driving because they're scared to stop." She swallowed hard. "And then what?" she asked. The officer looked away. "Some of them never make it home." She stayed at the station until sunrise. To this day, she refuses to drive that highway at night. She keeps her car locked, her radio off, and her windows rolled up. Because what frightened her most wasn't the whisper itself. It was how close it sounded, and how certain it felt. Almost as if whatever spoke from the back seat was already there, long before she ever heard it. Story 4. The Hitchhiker Who Was Never There. Truck drivers spend more time on highways than almost anyone else. They learn the roads. They learn the patterns. And most importantly, they learn when something doesn't belong. This story comes from Nevada and was shared by a long-haul truck driver who had been on the road for over 15 years. He had driven through storms, breakdowns, and dangerous stretches of highway, but nothing prepared him for what he experienced one cold night in the early 2000s. It was just after 3 a.m. when he was driving through a remote desert highway. The road was long and straight, bordered by endless darkness. No towns, no rest stops, just reflective signs and the occasional mile marker flashing past his headlights. Fatigue was setting in, but he was alert. Experience had taught him that the quiet hours before dawn were when drivers needed to be most careful. That's when he saw her. Standing near an exit sign on the shoulder of the road was a young woman. She looked out of place immediately. She wasn't dressed for the cold. She had no bag, no phone, no visible car. She was just standing there, hugging herself, her head slightly lowered. The driver slowed instinctively. Every rule he had ever learned told him not to stop for hitchhikers, especially at night. But something about her posture felt wrong. Not threatening, just lost. Against his better judgment, he pulled over. The woman walked toward the truck and climbed inside without hesitation. Her movements were quiet, almost careful. She sat in the passenger seat and softly said, "Thank you." Her voice was calm, too calm. He asked her where she was headed. She didn't answer.
The driver glanced at her. She was pale, her eyes focused straight ahead. She looked exhausted, but there was no visible injury, no sign she'd been walking for long. They drove in silence for several minutes. Then the temperature inside the cab dropped. The driver noticed it immediately. His breath fogged slightly in the air. He reached for the heater, confused. It had been working fine moments earlier. "Are you okay?" he asked. No response. He turned his head toward the passenger seat. It was empty. The door was still closed, the seatbelt untouched. No sound, no movement. The woman was gone. The driver slammed on the brakes and pulled onto the shoulder, heart racing. He jumped out of the truck, scanning the road in both directions. There was no one there. No footprints in the dirt, no sound in the distance, nothing but the hum of the engine and the empty highway. Shaking, he called the police. When officers arrived, they searched the area thoroughly. One of them asked the driver to describe the woman. As he did, the officer's expression changed. Slowly, the officer nodded. "You're not the first one," he said. The driver felt his stomach drop. The officer explained that years earlier, a young woman had been killed near that same exit after her car broke down late at night. Several drivers had reported picking up a hitchhiker matching the same description. Each time, she vanished from the passenger seat without explanation. Some drivers reported her disappearing silently. Others said her passenger seat was wet, as if someone had been crying. The driver refused to stay on that road any longer. He waited until daylight before continuing his route. To this day, he avoids that stretch of highway entirely. He says the most terrifying part wasn't that she disappeared. It was how real she felt, how normal the interaction was, how easily she got into the truck. And he still wonders, if he hadn't looked away, if he hadn't asked her a question, how long would she have stayed? Highways are full of travelers trying to get somewhere, but sometimes they're also filled with those who never did. So, if you're driving late at night and you see someone standing alone on the shoulder, remember this: not every hitchhiker is trying to go somewhere. Some of them are just trying to come back.
Most of us drive highways without a second thought. We trust the road. We trust the darkness. But these stories remind us of something unsettling. Not everything on the highway is moving forward. Some things are standing still, waiting. So tonight, if you're driving alone and you notice a car that won't pass, a figure on the shoulder, or a sound that shouldn't be there, don't ignore it, because sometimes the road remembers things, and sometimes it remembers you.